quick test. When I say the word violinist, what is the first thing that pops into your mind? Whatever it was, I'm going to guess it probably wasn't this. Now, most of us aren't really known as the muscular types, but that's really kind of a problem because not having an understanding of muscular anatomy can not only hurt your violin technique, but also the health and longevity of your playing. Allow me to fix that for you. I'm Tobias Murphy, and this is Murphy Music Academy. So why do you need to understand some basic muscular anatomy as a violinist or really any musician? I mean, so long as you know which body parts to move, it doesn't really matter that you know what moves that body part, right? Wrong! So while it's technically correct that you don't have to know that your tricep opens the arm and that your bicep closes the arm in order to open and close the arm, knowing which muscles are responsible for which movement can allow you much greater control over your muscles and help prevent injury by making sure that the muscular tension is isolated only in the muscles necessary for a particular movement or technique. For an example that's very pertinent to violinists, if we raise our arms like this, the primary muscles being used are the deltoid muscles. There's actually three of them, a front, middle, and back. And they control the motion of the arm at the shoulders, ball, and socket joint. However, if I ask you to raise your arm laterally like this, you probably aren't just using the central deltoid muscle. It's very likely that you're also using this muscle here called the trapezius. And this is where understanding muscular anatomy becomes so incredibly important. If you've ever suffered a playing injury, most likely the main culprit is this muscle right here, the trapezius. You see, the trapezius, or the traps, as we call them in the biz, are primarily a stabilizer muscle, meaning its primary purpose is not to control a joint, but rather to protect it. Now, you can move with the traps, but really the only movement that traps can do is to shrug the shoulders like this. Their primary purpose is to stabilize the neck and shoulder area, which means they are designed to hold tension. For instance, watch this video here of a strong man doing what's called the yoke walk.
Right to work.
And look at the speed he gets to so quickly, fast, short steps. Look at the foot pace. Unbelievable on this event.
Now, a massive component of this exercise is strength in the traps. So when something is placed on the shoulders, or even if you're holding heavy weights in the hands, the trapezius muscle is going to activate to brace your neck and shoulders. So when we place the violin on our shoulders, or when we raise the bow arm, it's completely natural for this muscle to activate. However, this is where the problems arise with violin playing. Even if a strong man is lifting over 1,000 pounds on his shoulders, the tension in the traps is only going to be held for a few seconds. Now, the violin, of course, weighs a mere ghost of a fraction of a percent of the weights used in strongman competitions. But if you don't learn how to control this muscle, you'll be holding that tension, however slight, for hours each day. Compound this over several years of playing, and you'll understand why a lot of violinists wake up one morning and can't feel their fingertips. So, if you understand what muscles are at play, then you can start to develop a mind-muscle connection in order to turn on or off certain muscles in a given movement. For example, let's go back to the issue of raising the arm. One of the most important things you can learn to do is how to raise the arm using only the muscles in the shoulder joint and not the trapezius. In fact, I want you to try something with me. Put your left hand on your right shoulder and very carefully raise your arm like this. And you want to be very, very aware of when the trapezius muscle starts to activate. If you're not used to this, at first you'll probably start to raise the shoulder even a little bit without realizing it. So you might actually have to push down on the shoulder with the left hand to make sure. So here's an example of doing it correctly. And here's an example of raising the shoulder with the deltoid. If you are doing it correctly, you should feel quite the stretch through here. Now, it might take you a while to get complete control of the muscles when raising the arm like this, but once you do, you then can apply that to violin playing. In fact, learning to raise the arm with just the deltoid muscles is one of the most important aspects of mastering bow technique. See, if you don't keep the shoulder down while bowing, you introduce a variable into your bowing technique. So if the shoulder is relaxed and just sitting as low as possible on the torso, which would be the state of the arm if the trapezius muscle is not engaged, then that provides a stable foundation of movement for every other motion involved in bow technique. how do I know when I'm just playing a normal bow stroke that what I'm doing here with my forearm will produce consistent results? Well, if nothing up here is moving, then I can train consistent, reliable motions in my forearm, elbow, and fingers. But if I start to raise the shoulder, it's not going to stay raised at the same height throughout all of my playing. The height of my shoulder, if my trapezius is engaged, is going to change as I'm playing. It's going to be variable, which means I no longer have access to consistency in the rest of my bowing technique. So this is just one reason why a basic understanding of muscular anatomy as it applies to violin playing is so important. If you didn't know about the different functions of the deltoid and the trapezius muscles, you may be in the dark as to how exactly proper bow technique is executed. Learning to keep the shoulder down and not engage the trapezius muscle is one of the most important things when it comes to having smooth bow changes at the frog. You can allow the arm to just sit here on the rib cage and then be able to control from the ball and socket joint, and with the other motions of the arm, then it's going to be so much easier to have smooth bow changes, as well as improving every other aspect of violin technique. Now, this is just one example, and to go into all of the possible examples of how an understanding of basic muscular anatomy as it applies to violin playing will improve your technique would take way too long than I have for this video. So let's talk about not just how you gain a basic understanding of muscular anatomy, but also how to best develop a mind-muscle connection. Now, of course, you could just look it up in a textbook, or more likely, look it up on the internet. However, I think that the very best place that you can learn both about muscular anatomy and also develop the mind-muscle connection in one fell swoop is through none other than good old-fashioned weightlifting. Now, if you find yourself having some immediate objections to this idea, stop it. You're not going to get bulky, even if you're a girl. It's not going to hurt your violin playing, in fact, quite the opposite. And if you do it properly, you're not going to hurt yourself either. The reason why I think weightlifting is so important for violinists and really all musicians is because if you're following a proper weightlifting routine, then you will inevitably learn about basic muscular anatomy. So let's say you know absolutely nothing about lifting weights. Well, you'll probably start with a basic arm workout. So let's say that goes well and you look into it a little bit more and you find exercises for the shoulders, and that's how you find out about the deltoid muscles. And then you keep going and you learn some exercises for your chest so you understand those muscles and how they work, and so on and so forth. Just getting into basic weightlifting, not even talking about anything heavy here, not only is going to be great for you physically, but it's going to teach you so much about muscular anatomy. And as I mentioned before, lifting is also probably one of the best ways to develop the mind-muscle connection. I've learned more about controlling muscles from weightlifting than I ever did in a violin lesson. As you progress through weightlifting, you'll start focusing more on how to better activate the appropriate muscle for a given exercise, rather than just moving the weight. This, combined with your newfound knowledge of muscular anatomy, will transfer over to your violin playing, making it much easier for your brain to turn certain muscles on or off, giving you much greater control over your technique. So, how do you get started? Well, obviously, having a home gym or a gym membership will make things a lot easier, but I understand not everyone can afford that. There are many guides online on how to start with just bodyweight exercises, but if you're finding that just a little too difficult, then you can probably buy a set of small dumbbells and start with those. I'd suggest trying a few different exercises, but start slow and look up reputable exercise coaches to show you how to properly perform basic exercises. On YouTube, somebody like Athlete X is a good go-to for this, but feel free to look up others as well. But do be smart about it. For instance, if you see anything by this guy, run. Anyway, outside of violin lessons, I found that lifting was one of the things I learned the most from and was the most applicable to my violin playing. So if you not only want to be healthier and stronger, but also improve your understanding of violin technique, I highly recommend it. Anyway, a little different video than usual, but I actually do think this is just as important as anything else I've talked about on this channel. I've been Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, always here to remind you that there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.